Okay. Welcome back, everybody, this week. Thank you very much. I know, every time we start this, each time we do it, I always have a lot of things that I think I'm going to say, and then I always panic and freak out, and I forget most of what I'm going to say. So tonight, I'm going to try and remember as much as I can. There's so many different things that I'm constantly, somebody mentions something, and then boom, 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 boom. But again, last night I had a conversation with an old friend of mine who was encouraging someone, and they had a question, and this person had somehow, I know that there are people now doing a lot of study online, and I would really encourage, if people are going to do study online, that you be very, very careful about making pronouncements that you're not completely sure of, that are not just realizations that you've come to. There should be always some basis of that realization foundationalized in a concept or something beyond you just winging it and deciding you're going to reinvent what things mean, because they can mean something other than what you understand them to mean. And it's very, very simple. It's no different than tonight I'm going to talk about those, going to Mr. Lee's questions. And he's got many questions that I'm going to try and do my best to answer. But it's primarily because of a lack of an ability to grasp this point. And that's the fact that that was then, this is now. Okay? Many of these questions and the clarifications that I'm going to provide, by the way, everybody, I'm going to read a lot from the orally transmitted teachings tonight. The point is that, when we compare Shakyamuni's teachings and the teachings of Nichiren, we have to understand that Shakyamuni's teachings, according to the Great Collection Sutra, all lose their power and efficacy after the 2,000 years after his death. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to master things that the teachings themselves say are going to outdate themselves as valid teachings by now. Okay, that's what motivated Nichiren Daishonin to start contemplating the fact of the time, and that's why we get into the whole selection of time. I'll be able to tell you right now, most of the answers to the questions that will be asked tonight are in the selection of time. Go to page about 541 and start reading from there. And on volume 1. The selection of time will answer a lot of the questions that we're going to touch on tonight in more detail. If you want to hear it from Nichiren, in Nichiren's words, I'm saying, okay? So, Mr. Lee had left several questions, starting back with the one that made me cry. And, the thing about it, too, is I wanted to mention this, is that I'm answering Mr. Lee's questions because Mr. Lee has a serious and sincere seeking spirit. And Mr. Lee just spent a while with us while we were doing Daimoku before Gongyo. And for all I know, Mr. Lee is now chanting. I hope you are, bro. You're still asking a lot of questions, though, that dip back into the Buddhism of the harvest. And Buddhism of harvest is then. And Buddhism of sowing is now. And that's what I want to try and re-emphasize to you, because like last night, a good friend of mine from the States wrote to me, was talking about somebody else in his district. They were starting to do online study, and this person had come up with the conclusion that the true Buddha was Shakyamuni, and that Nichiren was the Buddha of the latter day. Okay, like there's a distinction between the two. And we do refer to Nichiren as the Buddha of the latter day of the law, but a latter day of the law is, again, predicated on a teaching of Kuan, okay? And the latter day of the law doesn't have an end, okay? So it's basically on for infinity, all right? It's just not going back prior to Shakyamuni at that point in time. But he already qualifies that this is original. So, Mr. Lee, I'm going to do my best to answer your questions tonight. First of all, I'm starting with what you asked back on April 15th. I'm not going back to all your questions. I'm starting with the questions that you asked in over a couple of weeks period of time from April 15th starting. And the first one was that made me cry was to see you refer to the Daishonin as the Master Nichiren, which is correct. That's why we call, So the Daishonin is the great teacher, the principal teacher at this point in time. So he says, you say, did Master Nichiren compose any other texts other than the 2 volumes of the writings of Nichiren, Daishonin, which you can go to nichirenlibrary.org and find both of those volumes of the writings. Let's see, those 2 writings and then the orally transmitted teachings. Now, again, do understand that for clarity's sake, the Daishonin did not write the record of the orally transmitted teachings. He spoke and preached it. And it was actually written down by his #1 disciple that never left his side, Nikko Shonin. Okay? And Nikko Shonin got Nichiren's seal to validate the fact that he had approved and authorized this interpretation and this deeper, not secret teaching of secret essence of his teachings, but this complete clarification and qualification of the Buddhism of sowing versus Buddhism of harvest, because that's what all of the OTT is. It's a constant clarification of what is the now understanding versus the then understanding. Also, Mr. Lee, understand that when we talk about Shakyamuni and we talk about many of the teachings of Shakyamuni, they expand time periods that go over like hundreds of years. Like again, you can talk about what we call Hinayana or the Theravada and the Pali Sutras. Okay, those are the ones that were all emphasized at the beginning of after Shakyamuni's death. And it was some time before the Mahayana Sutras began to appear. And if you talk to a Theravadan, they'll say all the Mahayanas are made up and bullshit. Okay, which you're going to wipe out a lot of the teachings that you already believe in, if you look at it that way. But mostly those are the Theravadan teachings of like the 12 chain links causation. They're all the rules and regulations kind of teachings. Okay, that they're more around a monastic discipline. Okay, other than the beyond expanse that actually Tiantai and everybody from Nagarjuna started to qualify and incorporate and introduce the Mahayana Sutras. Okay, so you've got all that to go into this question about what did the Daishonin write. But understand that he's very clear about the entirety, and this is the whole thing for you to understand, because you can't say this about the Buddhism of a harvest, okay? Shakyamuni left many, 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 many teachings, okay? They were very broad. They were for all kinds of levels of understanding and capacities. Nichiren left a single teaching. Now, he talks about that single teaching a lot. He qualifies about that single teaching a lot. But the Buddhism of sowing isn't like the Lotus Sutra or some vast amount of stuff. It's not even... The Buddhism of sowing is not even volume 1 and volume 2 of the writings of Nichiren Daishonin you're talking about. It is, he says, nothing more than Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. That is the entirety of the Daishonin's teachings are contained within the Daimoku, according to the Daishonin. Okay? So what does that say then? That means that through the recitation of the Daimoku, we bring forth those understandings that are innate in our life as disciples of the original teacher. We've made our advent not to start over as a rookie. We're helping all the rookies start over. The bodhisattvas of the earth have come to take over as it relates to the correct teaching in the latter day. So, your question is, did he compose any other texts other than the 2 volumes of the writings of Nichiren Daishonin that you see on www.nichirenlibrary.org? Yes, there are some goshos that are not included in Volume 1 or Volume 2. You should know that, okay? And it's because they're very esoteric, way over your head, and they're not, you could lead to a lot of misunderstanding if you didn't. I mean, we're talking about Nikko Shonin. We're really talking about only a few very specific gosho that have to do with the Nikko school. Okay, and so again, I've already explained, the orally transmitted teachings isn't actually written by the Daishonin. Volume 1 and Volume 2 are a collection of letters, okay? Those are all letters or treatises that were done in classical Chinese. Don't forget, we already discussed last week about how the 5 senior priests destroyed much of the material that the Daishonin had written and left for posterity in the form of the same encouragement that we have, that we read now, that we call Gosho. Don't forget, Gosho comes from the rendering of Nikko Shonin's interpretation that all of these letters were to be cherished as vital teachings to be held for posterity, because what the Daishonin was actually teaching was a different teaching than the Buddhism of Harvest. And you needed all of those doctrinal references, those letters, to help those qualify those issues, okay? And actually create the distinctions that you're asking about now. The next question you asked after that, so I hope that you understand that. Yeah, there are other writings of Nichiren Daishonin that aren't included in Volume 1 and Volume 2. I would say that they're not necessary for you to be aware of. The Soka Gakkai has gone out of their way to make sure that everything that could contribute to you understanding the Gosho correctly is already there in those 2 volumes. Do understand now that now once you get away from Nichiren Shoshu and you start venturing out into the world of Buddhism, a lot of people are going to attack even those texts as having validity, okay? So that's why you have a Volume 1 versus a Volume 2. There's actually, if you want to go into the weeds and take all of the Goshos that exist, which we would say then, when I talk about that, I'm saying maybe a couple of these Goshos that aren't in Volume 1 and Volume 2. They're traditionally qualified by academics as ABCs. Okay, there are A Goshos, B Goshos, and C Goshos. What is the distinction between A Goshos, B Goshos, and C Goshos? A Goshos are pretty much for sure they were left in the Daishonin's hands. There's some original documentation, a lineage that qualifies Nichiren wrote this text. Okay, B Goshos are Goshos that sound exactly the same, but they don't have that ability to just be documented. You know, all the other schools, you know, there's no qualification that that's actually not something that was written in Nichiren's name, as we know occurs throughout the history of Buddhism. Okay, so first of all, something written in Nichiren's name by somebody who had the appropriate understanding, or that was his direct disciple. Don't forget, that's why do we have all of Tentai's teachings? Because Chang'an wrote them down. But they were Tentai's teachings, so he didn't say, this is my teaching. This isn't Chang'an's Makashikan, even though he did it at the last, okay? Same thing for all of everything Shakyamuni said. Did Shakyamuni walk around with a notebook? Did he write anything down? No. Thus I heard, thus I heard, thus I heard. And that is doing all over the place, okay? So all of this is involved with something that's going to have to come from a manifestation of the Buddha nature inherent in your life if you're going to replicate the understanding that's actually being expressed in all of these teachings, okay? Now, the problem with the Buddhism of the Harvest is because it's done for Shakyamuni's disciples, okay, which all make their advent in the former and the middle day. It doesn't have, it has a morphed beginning and an insolvent end. There is no real definition of how to attain enlightenment or what the law is in the Buddhism Harvest. It's not until Nichiren. That's why Nagarjuna had to write all the shit that he wrote. That's what Vasubandhu and Nagarjuna and Tentai and Myolo and Dingyo, that's what they were all doing. They were all creating distinctions and clarifications of what had already been established, right? So, that's all about written doctrinal stuff. Then the next question you ask is about Gohonzons. You say, is the Gohonzon the same in all Nichiren schools? We discussed this last week. Obviously, it is not. The Gohonzon doesn't really exist in some Nichiren schools because the Gohonzon is specifically a scroll that's a depiction that was inscribed by the Daishonin and given only to his closest disciples. It was not understood by the 5 other senior priests. They used other objects of devotions. People had to have very sincere, be almost directly connected to Nichiren Daishonin personally before they were able to receive the true object of devotion, which is what he qualified the Gohonzon as. Okay? If you wanted to go into the weeds again and go check it all out so that you can debate everybody, you'll find out and know that there are all kinds of different looks to the Gohonzon. When the Daishonin started creating the Gohonzon, it kind of matured in the purpose of how he was wanting to express it. So as soon as the two Nichiren Shoshu broke away from Soka Gakkai, and suddenly there were Soka Gakkai members that were out looking at different stuff that they'd not ever heard of before, and somebody suddenly had this like circular kind of Gohonzon that was a Nichiren Gohonzon. There were very many different appearance Gohonzons because each one was an original as it was inscribed, and as it was inscribed, it was being advanced and perfected. Okay, do understand that. The Dai Gohonzon is much more complex and ornate than our Nichikan Shonin Gohonzon that we chant to every day. I mean, if you ever see the Dai Gohonzon, the Nichiren Shoshu qualifies as the one that the Daishonin inscribed for all mankind for the 10,000 years of Mappo and beyond. It's definitely different than the ones that we would have started practicing as Nichiren Shoshu believers. Those Gohonzons are all inscribed by each successive high priest. Okay, so even within myself, personally, Mr. Lee, I've practiced to 3 different Gohonzons. I've practiced to one that was inscribed by Nitatsu Shonin. I've practiced to one that was inscribed by Nikken and Ikekken Shonin, okay, which was a recent high priest. And I've practiced to 26th high priest, Nichikan Shonin's Gohonzon. So all 3 of them have been able to, I've been able to chant to all of them and receive benefit. Okay, but they were all actually a progression in the ultimate evolution of my understanding of what the Gohonzon was. Because when we first receive Gohonzon, we don't get into a real in-depth understanding. So the first thing that I wanted to do to answer Mr. Lee's questions tonight, and tonight I'm going straight into the Gosho. So in the OTT. So don't say dictionary definitions, or we'll lose half the people that I want to watch this. I am going to go into a dictionary definition. As I had said several weeks ago, most people don't understand this because they've never taken the time. They already think they know what the Gohonzon is. Why go look up what the Gohonzon is? Look in the Gosho. Look in the dictionary. What does it say the Gohonzon is? Is it what you think the Gohonzon is? So let me read out loud for everybody what the Dictionary of Buddhism says that the Gohonzon is. Gohonzon, object of devotion. The word go is an honorific prefix, and honzon means object of fundamental respect or devotion. In Nichiren's teaching, the object of devotion has 2 aspects. The object of devotion in terms of the law and the object of devotion in terms of the person. These may be described as follows. Now, I think that you guys also remember, though, the things that Nichikan Shonin is the one that qualified much of this. Okay, so do understand that. 1. So there's going to be 5 of these definitions of what the Gohonzon is. 1. The object of devotion in terms of the law. That's pretty easy to understand. The law of Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, Namu Myoho Renge Kyo, Nichiren down the middle of it, right? The object of devotion in terms of the law. Nichiren's mandala that embodies the eternal and intrinsic law of Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. Now, what's eternal mean? Without beginning or end. And intrinsic means it's intrinsic. It's innate in all things. All right? It's always ever present. It's intrinsic. All right? Embodies the eternal and intrinsic law of Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. That law is the source of all Buddhists, So all Buddhas would precede everything that Shakyamuni is talking about in the Lotus Sutra or in any of his other previous sutras, right? Because Buddhism didn't start with Shakyamuni when he was born on earth, right? In the 16th chapter, he says, no, it's been numberless major world system dust particle kalpas since I attained Buddhahood, right? So it's not about earth. You got to get away from that. The object of devotion in terms of the law, Nichiren's mandala that embodies the eternal and intrinsic law of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. That law is the source of all Buddhas and the seed of Buddhahood for all people. All right? In other words, Nichiren identified Nam-myoho Renge-kyo as the ultimate law permeating life and the universe. Permeating means it's inclusive in everything. And embodied it in the form of a mandala. Okay? Again, if it's not his law, he couldn't have embodied it. In his teaching and in his questions and answers on the object of devotion, Nichiren refers to the object of devotion for the people of the latter day of the law as the title Daimoku of the Lotus Sutra. He further describes the title as the essence of the Lotus Sutra. The essence, in other words, if you boiled everything that's in the Lotus Sutra, what's its most prime essential teaching, its most essential point, is Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. He further describes the title as the essence of the Lotus Sutra, or Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, to be found only in the depths of the lifespan 16th chapter of the Sutra. Again, you know, that threefold secret teaching, again, hidden in the depths versus it's not on the surface. The object of devotion for observing the mind, which we know is one of his 10 major writings, is actually one of his 3 major writings, actually, reads, Myoho Renge-kyo appears in the center of the treasure tower with the Buddha Shakyamuni and many treasures seated to the right and the left, and flanking them, the 4 bodhisattvas, followers of Shakyamuni, led by superior practices, Manjushri, Maitreya, and the other bodhisattvas, who are followers of the 4 bodhisattvas, are seated below. In this passage, Nichiren clarifies the relationship between the law of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, the Buddha's Shakyamuni and many treasures, and the various bodhisattvas depicted on the Gohonzon. In this way, he emphasizes Nam-myoho Renge-kyo as the fundamental object of devotion. In other words, they're already all included. All those other objects of devotion, Amida, Shakyamuni, whatever you wanted to use as an object of devotion prior to the Gohonzon being inscribed and being propagated by the Daishonin. After the Gohonzon is the correct object of devotion. He so says, in this passage, Nichiren clarifies the relationship between the law of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, the Buddha's Shakyamuni and many treasures, and the various Buddhas depicted on the Gohonzon. In this way, he emphasizes Nam-myoho Renge-kyo as the fundamental object of devotion. The real aspect of the Gohonzon explains that all living beings of the 10 worlds, excuse me, display the dignified attributes that they inherently possess. In the real aspect of the Gohonzon explains that all living beings of the 10 worlds display the dignified attributes that they inherently possess. That includes the 10th world. Through the benefit of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, Nichiren viewed the Diet Gohonzon, the object of devotion he inscribed for all humanity on the 12th day of the 10th month in 1279, as the purpose of his life. This can be gleaned from his statement On Persecutions Befalling the Sage, written in the 10th month of 1279. Pardon me, my voice. I have to clear my throat. Pardon me. Written in the 10th month of 1279. The Buddha fulfilled the purpose of his advent in a little over 40 years. The great teacher Tentai took about 30 years. The great teacher Dengyo some 20 years. I have spoken repeatedly of the indescribable persecutions they suffered during those years. For me it took 27 years, and the great persecutions I faced are well known to you all. The object of devotion in terms of the law is explained in greater detail in Nichiren's writings, such as the object of devotion for observing the mind and the real aspect of the Gohonzon. Both of those have already been read by us. They're already on video if you want to go back and watch them to read those two Goshos. The second of the definitions of the Gohonzon, 2. The object of devotion in terms of the person. Now, the first one was the object in terms of the law, right? In terms of the person. You can't separate the person and the law. This is the key here. In his reply to Kyogo, Nichiren writes, I, Nichiren, have inscribed my life in Sumi ink, so believe in the Gohonzon with your whole heart. The Buddha's will is the Lotus Sutra, but the soul of Nichiren is nothing other than Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. So again, if the Gohonzon is Shakyamuni, Nichiren can't inscribe Shakyamuni's life into the Gohonzon. He can only inscribe his own. He created the Gohonzon. He only have the power to inscribe his own life into the Gohonzon. He didn't say my Buddha nature that is the same as Shakyamuni. He says my life. It is my Buddha nature, which is the same as all others. But he couldn't have inscribed Shakyamuni's life. So anybody looking at the object of devotion as something related to Shakyamuni Buddha,
that's wrong.
Doesn't even make any sense. Let me just go ahead and let you. This is again Nichiren Shoshu and the tenets that we uphold. But this is why Soka Gakkai has defeated every one of the other schools, the 5 schools. There's nobody that can debate this shit. They might be able to debate me, but they can't debate the study department of Soka Gakkai. Soka Gakkai's already whipped everybody's ass on all this stuff. Frankly. Okay, so I love it when white people from America try to reinvent shit that they don't know anything about. Pardon me, but I get a little bit upset about that. It's already all been discussed. It's already been, these battles have already been won. You just have to do the homework to understand them. 2. The object of devotion in terms of the person. In his reply to Kyogo, Nichiren writes, I, Nichiren, have inscribed my life in Sumi ink, so believe in the Gohonzon with your whole heart. Believe in Nichiren. The Daishonin's will is the Lotus Sutra, but the soul of Nichiren is nothing other than Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Nichiren here expresses his realization that Nam-myoho Renge-kyo is the origin and basis of his life, as it is for us as well as his disciples. He taught us that, right, which is embodied in Sumi ink in the form of the mandala he calls the Gohonzon. Now, I didn't create the Gohonzon, or I might have said I've inscribed Tom's life in Sumi ink. Do you understand my point? All right. In the record of the orally transmitted teachings, he says, the object of devotion is thus the entire entity. This is very important. The object of devotion is thus the entity of the entire body of the votary of the Lotus Sutra. The votary here refers to Nichiren himself. He's the original teacher. He also says the Buddha of the latter day of the law is an ordinary person and an ordinary priest. We're all Buddhas of the latter day of the law. An ordinary person here refers to Nichiren and us as well, because Nichiren revealed and spread Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, which is manifest as the person in the law. He is regarded by his disciple and designated successor Nikko and his followers as the Buddha of the latter day of the law. Nichiren himself writes in the opening of the eyes, on the 12th day of the 9th month of the last year, between the hours of the rat and the ox, this person named Nichiren was beheaded. It is his soul that has come to this island of Sado, and in the 2nd month of the following year, Snowbound is writing this to send to his close disciples. He states that he was beheaded, though actually he survived the execution at Tatsunokuchi, implying that the ordinary person Nichiren ceased to exist. In this context, the passage, it is his soul that has come to the island of Sado, his place of exile, means that Nichiren described himself as having revealed a deeper, true identity in the course of his attempted execution. Again, Nikko in IKKO and his followers equate that identity with the Buddha of the latter day of the law, which is the Buddha of Gohonzon, which is the original Buddha, the original teacher, who we were all one with, because that Buddhahood's not separated. It's an awareness that was originated by something that carried it forward. The third one, okay, so the first one was The law. The second one was the person. And then what's the third one? The thing that makes those two the same. The same that makes those two the same. Because if they're not both the same, there's a distinction being made. There's a separation being made. There's a separation being made between you and me and the Gohonzon too. Because don't forget, we're Latter-day Law Buddhists, right? Okay, so he says the oneness of the person in the law. This means that the object of devotion in terms of the person and the object of devotion in terms of the law are one in their essence. The law is inseparable from the person and vice versa. The object of devotions in terms of the law is the physical embodiment as a mandala, the Gohonzon, of the eternal and intrinsic law of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. Nichiren writes in his reply to Kyo, I, Nichiren, have inscribed my life in semi ink, so believe in the Gohonzon with your whole heart. This passage indicates that Nichiren embodied in the Gohonzon the state of life he enjoyed as the eternal Buddha who personified the law, so that people could attain the same state of enlightenment. The record of the orally transmitted teachings reads, the body that is freely received and used, also the Buddha of limitless joy, is none other than the principle of 3,000 realms in a single moment of life. Okay. Again, the record of the orally transmitted teachings reads, the body that is freely used that is freely received and used, also the Buddha of limitless joy, which is the Buddha that spreads this truth to all the other unenlightened people and awakens them, right? Which is what we do, is none other than the principle of 3,000 realms in a single moment of life. What's that say to you? It's not other than the innate Buddhahood that you reveal by chanting Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. The great teacher Dingyo says a single moment of life comprising the 3,000 realms, and the 3,000 realms includes Buddhahood in this moment, right? That's the whole thing about 3,000 realms, right? You understand that? A single moment of life comprising the 3,000 realms is itself the body that is freely received and used. This Buddha has forsaken august appearances. The Buddha who has forsaken august appearances is the Buddha eternally endowed with the three bodies. Now Nichiren and his followers, so he's equating us to being completely equal to him in this regard of person and law. Do you understand? So my first two definitions weren't to establish the law as something separate, because the law is in everything. The Gohonzon is the means for you to achieve the perception, understanding, and connection with that law. That is already in everything. The person is the revealer of that truth. All right? But it doesn't make him a supernatural special person that's so different than us. He's exactly the same as us. That's why the person and the law are the same. And point 3 is qualifying that. You hear what I just said? Let me read it again. The record of the orally transmitted teaching reads, the body that is freely received and used. Now, when we're out there doing shakabuku, utilizing our lives freely for the sake of propagating the teaching of Mappo, Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, what are we doing with our body? We are freely, we freely received it, and we're using it to create that equality that all Buddhists try to establish, to make everybody equal to themselves, to establish enlightenment in all things, right? The awareness of what Buddhahood actually is. The body that is, am I making any sense?
Yes.
Okay. The body that is freely received and used, also the Buddha of limitless joy, is none other than the principle of 3,000 realms in a single moment of life. It's you, Mr. Lee. The great teacher Dingyo says a single moment of life comprising the 3,000 realms itself is the body. You, bro, that is freely received and used. This Buddha, you in your present form, has forsaken august appearances. The Buddha who has forsaken august appearances that he's referring to is the Buddha eternally endowed with the three bodies. Who's that Buddha? Everybody. The Buddha who has forsaken august appearances is the Buddha eternally endowed with 3 bodies. Now, Nichiren and his followers who chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo are just this, because we're able to manifest those 3 bodies because we embrace the correct teaching, the great pure law. The Buddha who has forsaken august appearances means a Buddha who is no different from an ordinary person in form and appearance. You, Mr. Lee, me, Tom, everybody that's listening to me. Also the Gohonzon, in the same manner as the law and the person. Are you all with me? All right. So then 4, the core of the 3 great secret laws. The core. The Gohonzon, or the object of devotion of the essential teaching, is the core of the 3 great secret laws in Nichiren's doctrine and represents the purpose of his life. So, what are the 3 great secret laws? Object of devotion, the invocation, and where the object of devotion is enshrined, right? Okay, so now Nichiren and his followers who chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo are just this, because they embrace the object of devotion that brings forth the innate eternal Buddhahood that exists in their life. The Buddha who has forsaken, the core, I slipped back into 3, The core of the 3 great secret laws, the Gohonzon, or the object of devotion of the essential teaching, is the core of the 3 great secret laws in Nichiren's doctrine and represents the purpose of his life. The 3 great secret laws are the object of devotion of the essential teaching, the invocation or daimoku of the essential teaching, and the sanctuary of the essential teaching. Again, the daimoku came before the actual object of devotion. That's what makes this a little confusing. Here, essential teaching refers to the teachings of the teaching of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, not to the essential teaching latter half of the Lotus Sutra. So none of the Buddhism of sowing is actually contained in Buddhism, anything in the Buddha of the harvest, including the Lotus Sutra. Do understand that. All right? All right? Do understand that. That's why we borrow and refute, and we borrow and use. We're not. Okay. Nichiren expressed the law of Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. He realized within his own life in these 3 forms, which corresponded to 3 types of learning: precepts, meditation, and wisdom. That was the 3 great secret laws. The object of devotion corresponds to meditation, the invocation to wisdom, and the sanctuary to precepts. Sanctuary is a translation of the Japanese word kaidan, which is also translated as ordination platform. So that's kind of, our Butsudan is like the ordination platform. That's what it's actually serving as. As you remember, we had to wait for Dengyo to do the great Mahayana ordination platform. We have one in our own home. This is a platform where practitioners vow to uphold the Buddhist precepts. That's where all the priests that's where they got tonsured and became priests, right? It's the same thing we're doing every time we get in front of the Gohonzon. We're retaking the vow as a bodhisattva of the earth to uphold the law in the latter day. In Nichiren's teaching, to embrace the object of devotion is the only precept. It's the precept of the diamond chalice. And the place where one enshrines the object of devotion and chants the daimoku is called the sanctuary. Again, to keep faith in the object of devotion and chant the daimoku while teaching others to chant it is called the invocation. Both the sanctuary and the invocation derive from the object of devotion. Hence, the object of devotion, the Gohonzon, is the core of all 3. But again, this is all predicated on the faith that manifests any of that in the first place. For this reason, the Gohonzon, or object of devotion, is also referred to as the 1 great secret law, according to Nichikan. All right? 5. The inscriptions on the Gohonzon. In the center of the Gohonzon are written the Chinese characters Nam-myoho Renge-kyo Nichiren. This indicates the oneness of the person and the law. On either sides are the characters for the names of beings representing each of the 10 worlds. At the top of the Gohonzon, the names of Shakyamuni Buddha and Many Treasures Buddha appear respectively to the immediate left and right when facing the Gohonzon of these central characters. But again, Shakyamuni's little character up here, Namu Myoho Renge-kyo Nichiren, is what's down the front and the center. All right. Names of Shakyamuni and appear respectively to the immediate left and right when facing the Gohonzon of these central characters. They represent the realm or world of Buddhahood. The four bodhisattvas, the four great bodhisattvas, superior practices, superior practices, boundless practices, pure practices, and firmly established practices, who led the other bodhisattvas of the earth, are positioned to the left and to the right of the two Buddhas. They, along with the other bodhisattvas in the second row from the top, such as Universal Worthy and Manjushri, represent the realm of bodhisattvas. Also in the second row are persons of the two vehicles, voice hearers and cause awakened ones, such as Shariputra and Mahakashayapa, and flanking them are representatives of the realm of heavenly beings, such as Brahma, Chakra, and the Devil King of the sixth heaven, and the gods of the sun and the moon. In the third row appears a world-turning king, representing the realm of human beings, an Asura king, representing the realm of the Asuras, a dragon king, representing the realm of animals, the mother of the demon children, and the 10 demon daughters, representing the realm of hungry spirits, and Devadatta, representing the realm of hell. Moreover, the four heavenly kings are positioned in the four corners of the Gohonzon, again when facing the Gohonzon, Vaishravana in the upper left, upholder of the nation in the upper right, wide-eyed in the lower left, right, and increase in growth in the lower left. While all other figures on the Gohonzon are represented in Chinese characters, the names of Wisdom King Craving Filled and Wisdom King Immovable are written in Vaishravana and are written below Vaishravana and Upholder of the Nation, respectively, in Siddham, a medieval Sanskrit script. Here, the Wisdom King Craving Filled represents the principle that earthly desires are enlightenment, and the Wisdom King Immovable, the principle that the sufferings of birth and death are nirvana. Other characters on the Gohonzon include the names of the great Bodhisattva Hachiman and the Sun Goddess. All these names express the principles that the 10 worlds exist within the eternal Buddha's life, and that living beings of the 10 worlds can attain Buddhahood. Not all of the above names appear on every Gohonzon that is transcribed from the Dai Gohonzon, that was just a description. You won't find a second row there. We're shorter row on Nichikan's because it doesn't matter. Can attain Buddha. Not all of the above names appear on every Gohonzon that is transcribed from the Dai Gohonzon, but whichever ones do appear represent all of the 10 worlds, which is the point of them appearing in the first place. The names of the great teacher Tentai and the great teacher Dingyo are inscribed in the lower part of the Gohonzon, representing those who transmitted the true lineage of Buddhism. There are 2 inscriptions gleaned from Yolo's annotations on the words and phrases of the Lotus Sutra, which Nichiren used to describe the power of the Gohonzon and the law it embodies. One, placed on the upper right, facing the Gohonzon, reads, "Those who vex or trouble the practitioners of the law will have their heads split into 7 pieces." The other, in the upper left, reads, "Those who give alms to them will enjoy good fortune surpassing the 10 honorable titles." The 10 honorable titles are epithets applied to the Buddha expressing his virtue, wisdom, and compassion. In the lower right is Nichiren's declaration that this is the great mandala never before known in the entire land of Jambudvipa in the more than 230 years since the Buddha's passing. And that's the definition of the Gohonzon from the dictionary. Good morning from Chicago. Oh, good morning. Great. It must be probably Nancy. Mm-hmm. Is it Nancy? Mm-hmm. Hi, Nancy! All right, you just missed a little bit. You can go back and catch it up. So that was the Gohonzon. Then the next thing I'm going to read is the Lotus Sutra of the Wonderful Law. And this is really all you got to worry about, Mr. Lee, because let me go back to his next question. Okay, so, pardon me. All right, so that was the 2 questions that you asked from 415. Then you immediately asked, pardon me. Hope everybody stays safe, using their hand sanitizer. All right, that's me again, okay. Then Mr. Lee wrote on in the next week, The first week that we started reading Human Revolution, Volume 7, The Prime Point, Mr. Lee wrote this. He said, Tom, watching and listening to this film, I gained a broader understanding of a perspective that I don't know how to describe. That we are getting what is really going on. Nevertheless, from an analytical thought, we want to put into question in conjunction with what was taught in this film. The question put apart from my two previous questions is, which I've already now answered, how did Nichiren come to the conclusion of just the Lotus Sutra and chanting just its name after first he was studying in a monastic university institution in Japan, apart from the major schools, Zen and Pure Land in his time? Didn't he also study the other texts from other sects and tenets of Buddhism to a refutation? Yes, is your answer. Whether he studied the 4 Buddhist philosophical tenets like the mind-only school and the middle way school, he studied them all, Mr. Lee, so that you know. He studied them all. Whether he studied the 4 Buddhist philosophical tenets like the mind-only school and the middle way school, has Nichiren wrote about and refuted to presume his conclusion. Did it say how many years he was studying and probably researching before he had done his proclamation, like what he had done? So he's asking questions about how did he source all of this stuff? He says it's okay to start from Tentai, then down to Nichiren. However, from Tentai being the Lotus Sutra as the root, or Holy Grail, or the one of that sect, if not mistaken, also collaborate with the 3. Okay, so he's okay. First of all, you've got so much loaded in here that, first of all, almost no Nichiren Buddhist would understand what you're talking about. Okay, so do understand that, Mr. Lee. All right, I'm going to try and break it down a little bit. All right, and I think the easiest way for me to do that now is, before I start to try to break this question down and the next question down, I'm going to go to the orally transmitted teachings, because much of what you're asking is there.
Okay.
All right? So let me close this for right now. I'll be getting back to more from the dictionary and Mr. Lee, but right now I'm going to read for you. And Mr. Lee, when we talk about, you go to Tentai and you say it's okay to start from Tentai. Yeah, because I don't give a shit about the Flower Garland Sutra, bro. And I don't give a shit about a lot of those other sutras. All right? There's nothing for me to learn from the Flower Garland Sutra that's not already contained in the teachings that I'm able to have the time to master and focus on. Okay? And that's what the Daishonin was trying to say. You could look at all this stuff from the Buddhism Harvest, but if you go to the Great Collection Sutra, who preached the Great Collection Sutra, Mr. Lee? It was Shakyamuni. What does Shakyamuni talk about in the Great Collection Sutra? He says 2,000 years after his death, his teaching is going to become obscured and lost. It's going to become so screwed up it's not going to have any validity anymore. So why would anybody want to continue to focus on studying old shit that Shakyamuni himself said isn't going to have any validity anymore in the time that we're in right now? And that's why Nichiren started out studying his ass off to try and figure out, because he realized he was already living in the 5th half millennium. He already realized, whoa, it's already saying here in the Great Collection Sutra that everything's going to stop. What's this great law that he refers to in the Lotus Sutra? That's why Tentai was so into the Lotus Sutra, because it opened the way for what was going to and what was supposed to occur after the end of the second 1,000 years. And again, I go back to that selection of time. If I had the time to read you all of the paragraphical content that I could, that would answer all of your questions very clearly in the words of Shakyamuni, I have to go back and read too much so that I can't do it all in an evening on one of these kinds of deals. So, Mr. Lee, when you ask these questions, they're way too involved for me to do in an hour. Let me go ahead, though, and go back to what I wanted to make sure I get in and get this in for sure. Part of what I need to read to you now is 2 points from... Okay, I know what I was going to say. One of the reasons why we don't go dipping back into the Buddhism Harvest is it's outdated according to the Buddhism Harvest, okay? And Secondly, the reality is that what was the entire bosom harvest leading to? Okay? According to somebody much more capable than you or me, Mr. Lee, Tiantai, it was all leading to the perfect teaching. What is the perfect teaching? When there are four divisions of teaching from Shakyamuni of all the sutras. The sutras are all divisional or categorized, right? By complexity. The Hinayana stuff, you mentioned 12-link chain of causation. That's really kindergarten stuff. Dude, sorry, but it is. Not if you want to try and wrap your head around it to become enlightened. Good luck. You can do that for a long time. Sounds very profound, but it doesn't make you Buddha. It doesn't take you to Buddhahood. The point that Shakyamuni's teaching was to do all of that as an expedient. What is Shakyamuni's most profound teaching outside of the Lotus and Nirvana Sutras? The Kegon Sutra. What's the Kegon Sutra? It's the Flower Garland Sutra. What's the first sutra that he taught? The Flower Garland. So he did the Flower Garland first, saw that nobody understood what the hell he was saying, and then he went to the Agamas. Then he went to the low-end, do this, don't do that, do this, don't do that stuff, rules and regulations stuff. The stuff that sounds like Christianity. The stuff that sounds like, oh, that sounds like right teaching. No, that's for people that are not enlightened, people that need to be told what to do, people whose Buddha natures are not activated. Once a Buddha nature is activated, all you need is to continue. All right? So, what was the purpose of the Lotus Sutra? Why do we have a Shakyaman and a Honman in the Lotus Sutra? Why do we have the first 14 chapters differentiated from the second 14 chapters? Because the first 14 chapters are theoretical. Okay? And the second 14 chapters are essential. Why? Only because of what's revealed in the 16th chapter. Now, what's revealed in the 16th chapter? That he didn't attain Buddhahood for the first time in this lifetime. So all of his teachings were to get you to the point to tell that he could finally say, I didn't just find out about all this stuff. And all these dudes I've been pulling in to say they're the ones that taught me, I was BSing because you couldn't handle the truth. Okay? And in this sutra, I'm telling you the truth. It's been numberless major world system dust particle kalpas since I, in fact, attained in Buddhahood. And not once since I started my preaching until now have I actually revealed the truth. But now I must reveal the truth. And why am I going to reveal the truth? Because you guys have all begged me to reveal the truth to you 3 times. Okay? Read the Lotus Sutra. If you read the Lotus Sutra, it's all very clear. It's saying, shit can the previous teachings from the perspective of relying on them as a manner to attain Buddhahood. Don't shit can them from the standpoint of being invalid and having nothing to offer. Learn how to perceive them correctly from the observation of the mind aspect that Nichiren teaches. There's still valid stuff in there. It's not suddenly no longer valid, but it's not. It's an expedient means validity. It's not the true truth. It's not a lie. It's not the true truth. The true truth is contained in the Lotus, which is saying that we don't acquire these 3 bodies over a vast period of time. They're already innately in human life. They've always been there. And so, to get to that point, don't forget to label this. Chapter 16, orally transmitted teachings. Chapter 16, point 2, 3, and 4. All right? All right? Okay. That'll get them to watch. All right. So let's qualify this further. What I'm trying to get to, and I'm going to have to go ahead and stop way before I was going to. But at least I'll get 2, 3, and 4 out. All right, so going to point 2. And we're going to do this again next week, Mr. Lee. I'll wrap all this up next week. And then after that, June starts. And we're going back to Teachings for Victory, Volume 1. Everybody around the table, June, we'll start doing our old thing again. Everybody, keep your masks on. Keep washing your hands. All right, going to the orally transmitted teachings, chapter 16, point 2, from the lifespan chapter. Point 2, regarding the words, You must listen carefully and hear of the thus come one's secret and his transcendental powers. That's what you're seeking, Mr. Lee. That's what everybody wants. You want mind candy. You want some secret and transcendental powers. Okay, so let's clarify what secret and transcendental powers are. The record of the orally transmitted teaching says, this passage supports the concept of one who is eternally endowed with the three bodies. Various interpretations on these words have been transmitted. So there have been plenty of people talk about this secret transcendental powers before. But he says, as for the transcendental powers, the actions that are, he says, this passage, okay, so let's go, okay. The record of the orally transmitted teaching says, he goes right into what, this is Nichiren talking now. So this is Nichiren's quotation. This passage supports the concept of one who is eternally endowed with the three bodies. Now, that would be you and me. Any of us that are practicing Nichiren's teachings correctly, Buddhism sowing, all right? We already have the three bodies. I'll read that too. He's going to clarify that. Okay. The record of the orally transmitted teaching says this passage supports the concept of one who is eternally endowed with the three bodies, a Buddha. Various interpretations on these words have been transmitted. As for the transcendental powers, the actions that are carried out instant by instant, motion by motion, by us living beings are regarded as transcendental powers. The fact that we're alive and able to move around and be incarnate, that's a transcendental power. Thus, the voices of the wardens of hell punishing the offenders are all to be termed transcendental powers. The countless things in the 3,000 realms that undergo the process of birth, abiding, change, and extinction, all living, everything, all are in themselves embodiments of transcendental powers. So there's nothing spooky, mystic, magical about transcendental powers of the Buddha. Okay? They aren't otherworldly. Do understand that. Most people will try to become spooky, weird people that can shrink into little shit and float around and all kinds of other weird stuff. Go for it. How many personal, actual examples have you? None. But in the view of Nichiren and his followers, the realization, he says, okay, the countless things in the 3,000 realms that undergo the process of birth, abiding, change, and extinction are all in themselves embodiments of transcendental power. So whether you're aware of these things as being transcendental powers or not, they're transcendental powers. So life itself is transcendental powers, is what he just described. Mm-hmm. But in the view of Nichiren and his followers, from the standpoint of the realization of sowing, but in the view of Nichiren and his followers, the realization and understanding of the concept of attainment of Buddhahood in one's present form is what is meant by the thus come one's secret and his transcendental powers. For outside of the attainment of Buddhahood, there is no secret and no transcendental powers. So what is the attainment of Buddhahood in your present form? The realization that the correctness of the teaching that you already are the Buddha exactly as you are. Mm-hmm. Outside of that understanding, there's no secret. And outside of that, you have no transcendental powers other than life, other than your life itself. The eternally endowed three bodies mentioned here are gained through a single word, faith. And that single word is faith, or to believe. Therefore, the sutra says, we will believe and accept the Buddha's words. Chapter 16, you should stop and consider the meaning of these two words, believe and accept, Mr. Lee. Very important. Do you understand what he's actually saying? Let me explain to you what he's saying. Okay, first of all, he's saying, okay, you must listen carefully. Again, the thing that mystifies and makes it all spooky and weird and makes everybody want to be it because they all want to be a spooky, weird, special person, right? He's saying that the fact that we're alive is really contains that description. It's just describing life itself. Okay? But he's saying what it's specifically talking about is those that are endowed, eternally endowed with the three bodies. Now, theoretically, everything is endowed with the three bodies, but the three bodies actually become manifest when we hear the name and the words of the truth. Okay, right? Do you understand? Okay, so it's not something that just happens automatically. It is something that occurs through us encountering the teaching that professes this truth. We don't just think it up. We don't just chant Daimoku and suddenly realize this. Do you understand? We can come to the deepest understanding and realization by contemplating what's being said here in front of the Gohonzon. But in reality, it's applicable to all things, whether they chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo or not. Right? But only theoretically. Because until they chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, they don't actually reveal those three bodies. They're not activated, even though they've always been there. They've been there theoretically because they've never been able to be actualized. Okay, because they've never heard the name and the words of the truth. Are you with me? Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's why he's saying the eternally endowed three bodies mentioned here, when he says, which is this passage supports the concept of one who is eternally endowed with the three bodies. Mentioned here are gained through a single word. And that single word is faith, or to believe in the teachings of the Buddha of Nichiren. Therefore, the sutra says, we will believe and accept the Buddha's words. Chapter 16, you should stop and consider the meaning of these two words, believe and accept. Because if you believe and accept the words of the Buddha Shakyamuni, then you will believe and accept the words of his great collection sutra, where he says that his teaching will lose its power after 2,000 years, and that's why he's talking constantly about the fifth 500-year period. And if you go to the selection of time, Nichiren quotes all the places where he talks about that. And I'm not going to go back and do that for you. I've already said the page number in volume 1. You can go there, all right? That's point 2. So point 3, I read to you, but you didn't ever hear because you didn't view that video. I'm going to read it, and I'm going to read point 4 as well, and then we'll end for tonight. Point 3, regarding the words, but good men, it has been immeasurable, boundless, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s, millions of nayutas of kalpas since I, in fact, attained Buddhahood. All right, on page 126 of the record of the orally transmitted teachings, it continues. The record of the orally transmitted teaching says, I, in fact, is explaining that Shakyamuni, in fact, attained Buddhahood in the inconceivably remote past, not under the Bodhi tree, as he's been saying in all of his other sutras up until now, including the first 14 chapters of the Lotus. The meaning of this chapter, however, is that I represents the living beings of the Dharma realm. I here refers to each and every being in the 10 worlds. In fact, establishes that I, all of us, is in fact a Buddha eternally endowed with the three bodies. This is what is being called fact. Attained refers both to the one who attains and to the thing attained. Attained means to open or reveal. It is to reveal that the beings of the Dharma realm are Buddhas eternally endowed with the three bodies, just as they are. Buddhahood means being enlightened to this. That's how you open the door. In the word since, irai, the element I, already, or having passed, refers to the past, and the element rai, coming, refers to the future. And the present is included in these two elements, I and rai. The passage is thus saying that I, or the beings of the Dharma realm, in fact revealed the Buddhahood that is immeasurable and boundless in both past and future. Immeasurable and boundless in both past and future, goes back further than numberless major world system dust particle kalpas. He's talking about Kuan there. This passage is thus saying, I, or the beings of the Dharma realm, in fact revealed the Buddhahood that is immeasurable and boundless in both the past and future, which can only be Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. It is referring to the 100 worlds and 1,000 factors in the 3,000 realms in a single moment of life. I love it when you have that smile on your face, because I know you understand exactly what I'm saying. I like that. The two words hundreds and thousand in the sutra refer to the 100 worlds and 1,000 factors. This is all to make sure that everybody knows this all matches up with all the Tentai shit. I'm not pulling stuff out of my butt, is what he's basically saying there. He's saying the 200 and 1,000 in the sutra refers to the 100 worlds and the 1,000 factors. These then represent the reality of 3,000 realms in a single moment of life. Tentai's theorization of Buddhahood in your present form. But the Daishonin now qualifies as a declarative. Now Nichiren and his followers, those who chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, are the original lords of teachings of the lifespan chapter, which reveals eternal Buddhahood. Okay, that's its significance. So we're the original lords of teaching. Not Shakyamuni.
No.
Get it?
Yes.
Okay. Generally speaking,
We are badass.
we're badasses. Generally speaking, because we don't have to go through all that shit. Mr. Lee is asking, why don't we have to go through all that shit? Why don't we have to learn and master all this other shit that everybody says has to be mastered? Because the Lotus Sutra says we don't have to, bro. That's it. Now Nichiren and his followers who chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo are the original lords of teachings of the lifespan chapter. Generally speaking, the bodhisattvas of the theoretical teaching are not the sort of persons who are qualified to handle this chapter, because they can't wrap their head around the fact that they are already the Buddha. And so they will not accept that over and over and over again. For they employ an approach in which the theoretical teaching is on the surface, Shakyamuni's spoken words, and the essential teaching is in the background, Nichiren's interpretation of the Buddhism as sowing, which is really meant for the 10,000 years of Mappo. Okay? For the bodhisattvas of the earth to propagate throughout the world for everyone to attain Buddhahood. While Nichiren and his followers employ an approach in which the essential teaching is in the forefront, the hidden in the depths part, the Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, and the theoretical teaching, all the rest of this shit is in the background. It's backup. It's backstop. It's the background of the image of me. You know, it's that wall. It's all that. It's not essential. He says, be that as it may, this is the most important for everybody to understand, and you to understand too, Mr. Lee, and Rob, for you to tell your friend Kathy. Be that as it may, this chapter, chapter 16 of the Lotus Sutra, does not represent the teaching that is essential for the latter day of the law. Nam-myoho Renge-kyo isn't in chapter 16. It is only found hidden in the depths. Be that as it may, this chapter does not represent the teaching that is essential for the latter day of the law. 5 senior priests, you didn't hear this, did you? The reason is that this chapter embodies the Buddhism of harvest, because it's the Lotus Sutra, suitable for the time when the Buddha was in the world. But only, this is the beautiful part I was trying to clarify, but only the 5 characters of the Daimoku constitute the Buddhism of sowing. Not a whole big teaching. Just Nam-myoho Renge-kyo is the whole teaching of the Buddhism of sowing. But only the 5 characters of the Daimoku constitute the Buddhism of sowing that is suitable for the present time. Thus, the Buddhism of the harvest is for the time when the Buddha was in the world, and the Buddhism of sowing is for the time after his passing. Hence, it is the Buddhism of sowing that is needed in the latter day of the law. And I want to read point 4 because I've never read it, and it's short enough that you'll let me. Point 4, regarding the passage, the thus come one perceives the true aspect of the threefold world as exactly as it is. There is no there is no ebb or flow of birth and death, and there is no existing in this world and later entering extinction. And that was the other point I wanted to make because it's important for Mr. Lee to know this. The record of the orally transmitted teaching says, the thus come one is the living beings of the threefold world, When we look at these living beings through the eyes of the lifespan chapter, we can see and understand that the true aspect of these beings who in their original states possess, we can see the true aspect of these living beings who in their original states possess the 10 worlds, inclusive of Buddhahood. The aspect or characteristics of the threefold world are birth, aging, sickness, and death. But if we look at birth and death in terms of their true nature, there is no birth or death. And if there is no birth or death, then there is no ebb or flow. Not only do birth and death not exist, to look on birth and death with repulsion and try to escape from them is termed delusion, or a viewpoint of acquired enlightenment. We don't do nirvana blown out. We keep volunteering to come back into the ship because we get off on this. Seeing and understanding and as you laugh and shake your head, that must be the case or you wouldn't be here. You'd be off in some Buddha land, kicking, talking to other Buddhas, people worthy of your time, right? And space. Right, you wouldn't be here in the Sahe world. Seeing, okay. Where was I? Okay. The aspect or characteristics of the let me start over. The thus come one is the living beings of the threefold world. When we look at these living beings through the eyes of the lifespan chapter, we can see and understand the true aspect of these beings who in their original states possess the 10 worlds. The aspect or characteristics of the threefold world are birth, aging, sickness, and death. But if we look at birth and death in terms of their true nature, then there is no birth or death. And if there is no birth or death, then there is no ebb or flow. Not only do birth and death not exist, to look on birth and death with repulsion and try to escape from them is termed delusion, or a viewpoint of acquired enlightenment. Seeing and understanding the originally inherent nature of birth and death is termed awakening or original enlightenment. Seeing and understanding the originally inherent nature of birth and death is termed awakening or original enlightenment. That's what we do. All right? What do we do? We perceive the truth that there is no beginning, there is no end, there's no creation, there is no destruction. That's what makes us different from everything else. All right? Now when Nichiren and his followers chant Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, they realize the originally inherent nature of birth and death. The originally inherent nature is that they don't exist as birth and death. And the originally inherent nature of ebb and flow. That in reality, there is no such thing as ebb and flow, because birth and death don't exist either. We may also say, I hope I didn't whisper that too much. We may also say that non-existence, mu, and existence, u, birth and death, ebbing and flowing, existing in this world, and entering extinction are all, every one of them, actions of the eternally abiding inherent nature. The true process, that this is always continually going. From non-substantiality to temporary existence, non-substantial to temporary existence. All right? Non-existence indicates the actions of Myoho Renge-kyo. Non-existence indicates that the actions of Myoho Renge-kyo are none other than the Dharma realm. Existence indicates that hell, just as it is the total entity of the wonderful law originally endowed with the 10 worlds. You understood that, right? No? Okay. Let me just say again. Why does he always go, the wardens of hell? That means the wardens of hell are this. He always immediately goes to offset it. When he's talking about something that's this high, he immediately qualifies by saying, that means he's talking about this. He goes to the opposite extreme to make sure you understand it's all-inclusive. Hell is a part of Myoho Renge-kyo, just like, Buddhahood is. Non-existence indicates the actions of Myoho Renge-kyo are none other than the Dharma realm. Existence indicates hell, just as it is the total entity of the wonderful law, originally endowed with the 10 worlds. So you can always find Buddhahood in it. Birth indicates the wonderful law appearing as birth in accordance with changing circumstances. It seems like we were born, but we weren't really. Death is death as seen through the lifespan chapter, in which the Dharma realm is at the same time the true aspect of reality. There is no such thing as death. Because there is ebb, there is entering extinction, and because there is flow, there is existing in this world. Temporary existence and the state of non-substantiality. Thus, in terms of the three truths, non-existence, death, ebbing, and extinction represent the truth of non-substantiality or emptiness. Mr. Lee, this is all of your stuff you want to know. Where does this all flow into the other stuff? Thus, in terms of the three truths, non-existence, death, ebbing, and what are the three truths? Three truths. The three truths are, now you made me forget. The three truths are again, the middle way.
Oh, okay.
Okay. The middle way is it's neither temporary existence, non-substantiality, the truth of the middle way. Those are the three truths.
Yes.
Okay. Thus, in terms of the three truths, non-existence, ebbing, flowing, pardon me. In terms of the three truths, existence, death, ebbing, and extinction represent the truth of non-substantiality or emptiness. Existence, birth, flowing, and existing in the world represent the truth of temporary existence. And the true aspect of the threefold world that the thus come one perceives exactly as it is the truth of the middle way. That's the truth of both of those things being components of the same thing. In terms of the three bodies, non-existence, death, ebbing, extinction, and extinction represent the eternally endowed reward body. Existence, birth, flowing, and existing in the world represent the eternally endowed manifested body, and the true aspect of the threefold world that the thus one perceives exactly as it is the eternally endowed Dharma body. These three bodies are our own single bodies. That is why Words and Phrases Volume 9 says, which is Tiantai says, a single body is none other than the three bodies, a statement that is secret. So Tiantai is just qualified. This is why it says a single body is none other than the three bodies, which is already qualified as a Buddha. A statement that is secret. Tiantai is saying this is a secret, that people are Buddhas. And this is also why it says the three bodies are none other than the single body, a statement that is secret. This is also from the Makashikan, okay? Or pardon me, from Words and Phrases, from Tiantai though, okay? In which he's saying, again, everybody's got the three bodies, but this is a secret teaching because nobody will believe it. And the Daishonin is saying that's what that teaching from Tiantai meant all this time. Nam-myoho Renge-kyo is what it was trying to get to. He says, thus, the Buddha of the lotus, which is why I read all of this, why I wanted to get to this point. Thus, the Buddha of the lotus, that is the entity of the law, chapter 11.6, who is eternally endowed with the three bodies, is Nichiren and his disciples and lay supporters. That is because they embrace the title of honor Nam-myoho Renge-kyo. So we are all Nam-myoho Renge-kyo, thus come ones. There is no separation between the Gohonzon and our lives at all. Even though we say it's embodiment of Nichiren's life, this is the embodiment of life itself. The original teacher is teaching us how to pull that original state out of our 9 worlds and turn it into a 10-world existence. You follow me?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Lee, I'll give you one more week of this next week. Until then, I'll see everybody. Thank you so much. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hour and 15.